Hey everyone, Christopher Ruocchio here, author of the Sun Eaters science fantasy series from Daw Books and junior editor at Bane Books, where I've worked with sci-fi and fantasy writers for the last going on 6 years now. It'll be 6 years next month, actually. And so I wanted to sit down this evening, when I'm recording this, and put together a quick look back at all those things I've had published in the last year, because talking to folks in the last few streams and last few videos, comment sections and whatnot, I've realized that a lot of people don't know that I published not just one, but two books this year, two full-blown novels, albeit one is much shorter than the other, as well as 5 short stories, 2 of those in collections I edited, 2 in collections friends of mine have edited, and one that was for a podcast. It was sort of audio original that you can listen to absolutely for free. So I thought I'd sit down, run through all of those, let everyone know what's out there, because it's quite possible, it seems, that you may have missed one or two. So without further ado, here is a look back at the Sun Eater from 2020 AD. So this first book is the one that probably needs the least amount of introduction. Those of you familiar with my work, Demon in White came out in July. It is the 3rd book in the main Sun Eater series, the 3rd book in Hadrian Marlowe's story. It starts with Hadrian as a knight newly in the service of the emperor, and follows his indenture, more or less, as he is given impossible task after impossible task. If you haven't picked up Empire of Silence or Howling Dark, the earlier books in the series, you could very possibly pick it up here. I like to think of Demon in White as sort of the closing chapter in a trilogy of those first 3 books, but also the opening of a trilogy of books 3, 4, and 5. This series was never 3 books. For those of you who might have picked up the series thinking it was complete now, I'd never planned on writing a trilogy. It was originally 4 books when I sold it to Daw and to Golax over in the UK, but I managed to get the contract extended, so now it's going to be a total of 5 books. But as I say, this one sort of ends an arc of Hadrian, the arc of Hadrian being a young man and sort of growing into a sort of folk hero, hero of the empire. Whereas it also begins Hadrian's transition from folk hero into figure of legend, as we will see in these latter 3 books. It's available in hardcover and in ebook, as well as in audio for those of you who prefer to listen to your books. I happen to be one of you. Read by Sam Roken, same as the rest of the series. It will be out in paperback middle of 2021, but we'll talk about next year in another video. So this is the book that probably flew under the radar for a lot of people. I released it back in April, back when things were especially dire, and this is The Lesser Devil. The Lesser Devil is the story of Hadrian's younger brother, Crispin. It's set during the events of Empire of Silence, after Hadrian leaves Delos, travels to Emesh. He hasn't arrived just yet. That was about the right window to write a story with Hadrian, where Hadrian would have the minimum amount of impact. And so I wanted to look at an older Crispin. What's really exciting about this story for me is not only the fact that it's mostly actually an action story. It's about half battle by volume. The main series is told from Hadrian's point of view, right? It's first person, it's very subjective. And so Hadrian, of course, has his perspectives, and his perspectives can be wrong. And so what was fun with this book and with this character was to give Crispin a chance to tell his own story, to stick up for himself. And so we get a view of the man that is not really squared with Hadrian's perceptions of him that we got in Empire of Silence, besides the fact that he's older, wiser, a little bit less rough around the edges. And it is an action story. He is trying to protect his family from reprisals from an old rival, gets dragged into the middle of this plot, and he has to fight his way out with the help of some mysterious cultists who live in the mountains of his home planet, Delos. I've been really surprised by how overwhelmingly positive you all have been, those of you who've read it. I did this one sort of as an experiment. I wrote it back in 2018, finally got it out this year. I was trying to figure out the whole indie publishing thing, and Lord knows I'm slow to figure out new ideas. I do plan on doing some more of these sort of side project, I call them light novels because they're so short. They're formally novels, but in terms of length, but they are much shorter than, Demon in White's about 300,000 words. This is about a sixth of that. But I do plan on doing more of these in the near future. The next one, if I get my way, is going to be a Valka novella, light novel. And then after that, who knows? I would love to do one for Laurie and Aristides. I'd love to do a Bassander Lynn story, and a bunch more. Sir Oleron, for instance. Maybe Rain Smythe even, or Octavia Corvo. We'll see. The sky is the limit. The world is our oyster, but it all starts here with Crispin. If you haven't picked up a Sun Eater book before, this would be a great place to jump in. You don't need to read Empire of Silence or any of the others to jump in here. It probably would help. You might get a little bit more out of it, having Hadrian to compare against. But I did try and write it to stand alone, and I think more or less it succeeds. In that it is also available in audio. Sam Roken read that one as well. A lot of people seem not to know that. It's up on audible.com. It's on Amazon. It's anywhere audiobooks are sold. And from here, we're going to transition and talk a little bit about the short stories. As I mentioned at the top of the video, work as an editor for science fiction publisher Baen Books. And one of the things I do as part of my job is assemble these anthologies, usually with one of the other editors in the office. In this case, Hank Davis. Hank Davis is an old school sci-fi fan. He has sort of a photographic memory of the old sci-fi magazines like Analog, going back all the way to the 50s when he was a kid. Hank's been reading a long time. And so he comes up with the theme for these books. In this case, Overruled is a collection, an anthology of Law and Order stories, mostly courtroom stories with a science fiction bend to them. But my story in this, in contrast with the very comedic cover, is probably the darkest one I've written. It's called Victim of Changes, and it's the story of a chantry inquisitor, a judge, a praetor, who is trying an extrasolarian cyborg for crimes against her own humanity, sort of a witch trial, if you will. Those of you familiar with the Sun Eater universe will know that being a cyborg is a big no-no as far as the priests of the chantry are concerned, and things get complicated when this extrasolarian cyborg happens to have a still full human child, and it gets it's very heavy from there. I'm very proud of this story. If I were to tell you to check out any single one of these pieces of short fiction I'm about to talk about, Victim of Changes would be right at the top of my list. And the second book that I edited with Baen is this one here, Cosmic Corsairs. Cover was done by Don Mates, who did Captain Morgan, the label for the rum company. So when my boss asked me, hey, Christopher, who do you want to do the cover for this book? I said, it has to be Don, right? So we've got another kind of silly sci-fi cover, but my story, and this is another heavy one. Those of you who have watched The Mandalorian or are fans of hallway scenes will be happy to know that Hadrian gets one of his very own hallway scenes in my story. In this, The Night Captain. This story follows a junior officer in Hadrian's Red Company who's stuck with the command while the Tamerlane, their ship, is flying between the stars. He's supposed to watch while the crew from the books is in cryogenic sleep, and they get attacked by pirates. So he is not really prepared for that experience. He doesn't have a lot of field training, and he gets right into the thick of it. Fortunately, as I say, he has help from Hadrian Marlowe. This is the first time we get to see Hadrian from someone else's perspective, from the outside, and it was kind of fun to make him look as, well, mad, bad, and dangerous to know as he is. Now, these other two I mentioned, I did not edit, but I was in. The first of which here, Dogs of God, came out back in March. The gimmick here was that all the writers in the book were going to be named some version of Christopher, right? There are Chris's, Christians, Christophers, a couple Christiansens, and a couple Christinas, if memory serves, as well. Just this sort of a little joke. There's been a bunch of these sort of meme anthologies going around. I know there's a book of Michael's, and I heard there's a book of Jennifer's, and a book of David's being made as well. Just as sort of a joke. My story in this, Kill the King, is a 3-chapter sort of short novel, if you will, that is about an imperial assassin named Syme, who's been ordered by the emperor to assassinate an extrasolarian warlord named Callan Herendites, who has been amassing an army on the borders of the empire, and about all the things that go wrong trying to take this guy out. Another kind of dark story, another kind of heavy story, but one that I'm really proud of. It's also As of right now, the latest thing in the Sun Eater timeline that's been written, it's actually set after Kingdoms of Death. So if you read very closely, you'll get a couple clues about what's coming. And you'll get to look at Callan Herenditys himself, who's a character who's been mentioned very briefly in Demon in White, who will be referenced a couple times moving forward in the series. I like to use these short stories to sort of seed things moving into the future, and this is one of those times. The last story I did for an anthology was a story called Good Intentions that appeared in Shapers of Worlds, which was edited by my good friend Ed Willett. Ed is an award-winning journalist, Canadian journalist. He does this great podcast called The World Shapers. He's got a book called World Shaper as well, fellow DAW author, by the way. And on his podcast, he interviews all of these different writers. Orson Scott Card on there, John Scalzi, Sean McGuire, and myself did an interview with him as well. My friend DJ Butler, who I mention all the time here on the channel, did a talk with him and a bunch of others. And he thought, after the first year of doing this, he wanted to put a collection together of all of his guests. I believe Joe Haldeman, the great Joe Haldeman of Forever War, did a story for this. Oh, yeah, it's right there on the cover. And so there's a really great collection of some pretty well-known names in this one. My story in this, folks may be happy to hear, follows Valka herself. This is the first bit of Valka point of view writing that I have done. It's a pretty short story. Valka is on the planet Sadal Sud. This is before she's met Hadrian, before she's gone on that whole adventure, looking into some quiet ruins on Sadal Sud, which is also the home of an alien colonized species called the Kavarad, the giants. And she encounters one of these giants in slavery, being lorded over by the imperial occupants of this world, and Valka does her best to help, and things advance from there, shall we say. So for those of you who have been looking for Valka to have her own story, I did mention I'm planning on giving her own little book here in the next year or so, if I can get that jammed in before I start book 5, after I finish up writing Kingdoms of Death, of course. This would be your place to start. You can get a little bit of a taste of what Valka's life before Hadrian was like. And last but not least, I mentioned I did a story for my friend Jean-Paul Garnier's Simultaneous Times podcast. Those of you who've been listeners to the channel for the last couple months may have already heard The Duelist. The Duelist was the first story I did with Jean-Paul, and that one was just about a high matter sword fight. This one's a little bit more intense. It's called Fire in the Sky. It is about a Cielsan invasion on an imperial colony world, told from the point of view of one of the villagers. And you know how it is with Sullen imperial villagers. They don't really have a firm grasp of the wider universe. They live pretty small, pretty medieval-style lives. And so this young lady is trying to explain, trying to understand what is happening to her and to relay that in her story without really having any of the vocabulary. So it's got a very much fantasy meets science fiction element to it. That was really fun to write. We get to see the Cielsan almost as horror movie monsters, almost like orcs. The really cool bit of genre blending I got to do, and a fun story. And you can listen to that one absolutely for free. It will be here on the channel eventually, but for now, the only place you can get it is on Jean-Paul's Podomatic page, which I will link to in the description. There will be links to all of these in the description if you want to check out any of the books or the stories that I've mentioned. I got a lot more coming in 2021, a lot of work I need to do. Just because book 4 has been punted to 2022 does not mean that I am going to be idle. I've got about 15 chapters left to go in book 4. Thinking I'll be able to wrap that up just around the end of January, maybe the first week or so of February. We'll see. But I got a whole bunch of projects coming up in the next year, and I'll be doing a video about that real soon. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. If you haven't checked out my books and you made it through this video, well, thank you for that. And I hope we'll see you again real soon. Stay well, everybody.